Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you've been well. So I just got back like a week ago from a winter camping trip. Went out, it was -2 degrees Fahrenheit, nothing too, well, for some of you that might be crazy. For me, it's cold, but not crazy, but it was cold. So it got me thinking I should do a winter camping video. Actually, even before that, we were out shooting some content for Up Top Overland with this crew of guys, Vision Creative. They came out from California. They were totally prepared actually, but I had never met them before and I didn't know how prepared they were gonna be. So I packed up a bunch of extra provisions in case other people needed it, and I thought I should do a winter camping video while I'm like packing stuff for myself, but also stuff to give to other people. I brought out a few vehicles, so I had 2 other people sleeping in 2 of my other vehicles and me sleeping in a vehicle, and I kind of tried to just bring stuff for all of them. I forgot to make a video then. So I'm here after my trip. I've just grabbed some stuff that I took on that trip and a few other things that I just have sprawled on this couch and in the truck. This video is gonna be pretty casual, not too technical, and just kind of giving some advice. Now, I live in the mountains of Colorado. It's a joke on my channel here, but Colorado's not that cold. Compared to like Arizona, it is, but compared to like Alaska or Montana, it's not. So it's not the coldest place, and I'm not a mountaineering expert, and I don't have tons of, I'm kind of a relatively regular dude who enjoys winter camping, and I've picked up a few things along the way. Some of this is common sense. Some of this you might have not thought about before. Maybe it's just a refresher for people. I'm not talking about winter survival. I'm not talking about hiking 30 miles out into the wilderness and surviving on snow. This is just kind of some tips that you can take for car camping, or some of it has some backpacking overlap. Some is rooftop tents, some you can use for ground tents or in a camper shell or whatever. So I think let's just kind of get into it. I will link to stuff down below. I'm not going to talk too much specifics about like brands or specific gear or anything like that, but I probably will link some specifics down below for you. If you have any questions or what is this, or do you have a recommendation for that, leave a comment and I will do my best to get to it. So without further ado, let's talk about kind of the main points. I think when it's cold, you want to stay dry. So you want some clothes that are waterproof, especially if it's snowing outside, especially if you're going to be crawling around in the snow, so you don't get wet. If you get wet, it's much harder to stay warm. Some stuff does better when it's wet, wool versus cotton, stuff like that. But in general, you just don't want to get wet. So the idea here is to keep water out of your clothing and then to insulate your body. Your body's going to put off natural heat. Your body puts out however many BTUs. And those BTUs, that heat will just go out into the atmosphere. It'll go out and you'll get leached and you'll get cold if you can't keep that heat in. So insulation and layers, because typically you're going to be doing stuff depending on your levels of activity. You're going to be running hotter or cooler, and you don't want to run too hot because, again, you don't want to sweat a bunch because that's moisture and that's not as good for insulating and it'll make you cold. So layering, staying dry, those are kind of the key elements, and we'll talk about kind of some ways that you can do that. So for starters, wool socks are good. There's a bunch of them out there. I don't really have a specific brand that I like to use, but wool socks and base layer. So you get yourself a nice base layer. There's some really great synthetic materials. Usually a lot of them are based around merino wool, so at least have some merino wool content. This is merino wool and 37.5. These are Vertex's ones. So these are basically upgraded long johns. You're gonna put this underneath your pants, and I will typically wear them under my clothes when I'm out doing whatever, and then when I go to bed, I keep these on and I sleep in these. That's what I like. These ones have little cargo pockets on the side and a little fly basically that you can still pee out of if you want to, and elastic and very comfortable. And he'll keep you dry and add a little bit of extra insulation. These are, I'm just showing them because this is what I use all the time. These are, Vertex is the brand. This one has a hood and it has the little thumb holes so you can easily get in and out of your other layers of clothing and keep them where they need to be. So base layer clothes, super important. So that's socks and your base layer. Beyond that, you can wear whatever you want, whether that's canvas. I don't go too crazy. Sometimes I'll wear cotton or blended fabric or whatever. I don't get, like, other than the base layer, I don't go too crazy. Again, I'm not trying to be out there surviving. I'm just trying to be comfortable. But wool and other synthetics are great, but base layer is where that stuff is the most important. Then layer up, whether that's flannel or Henley or sweatshirt or jacket or whatever. If you're gonna be making a fire, like a campfire that's gonna be shooting up a bunch of embers and stuff, you might wanna be careful with your $800 Arc'teryx shell, because that stuff will get holes burned in it a lot of times. So sometimes canvas materials are better for that. But if you're not doing that, then synthetics are usually the way to go. They're lighter, they're more water impervious, the insulation on them is very good, but outer layer is kind of dependent on what you're really trying to do. Now, gloves are also important, especially depending on what you're working with. So whether it's just one of these kind of thin driving type gloves that'll just add an extra layer of insulation, a lot of times, depending on what you're doing, if you're working with tools or you're grabbing something metal or you're working on stuff with your vehicle, setting up your tent or whatever, that metal that you touch is gonna suck all the heat right out of your body. So having even a thin layer is really helpful. Beyond that, depending on what you're doing, if you don't need a ton of dexterity, you're just hanging out, talking to your friends, maybe hanging around the campfire or whatever, I like mitts. I like mitts because your fingers stay together and they can rely on the warmth of the rest of your fingers kind of in one place. And then the other thing is you can put hand warmers in your mitts and be super, super comfortable. So I will oftentimes like a mitt paired with hand warmers, especially if it's very cold, if I don't need the dexterity of individual fingers. Then you have boots. So at a minimum, you're gonna want waterproof boots. Again, you're trying not to get water in your feet and get cold. So waterproof boots are one thing, but then snow and whatnot can work its way up over and into your boot. So that's just as bad as if you weren't wearing waterproof shoes. So for that, you need gaiters. I have a dozen pair of gaiters. I just keep them in vehicles and whatnot. Gaiters, essentially, I'll show you. If you don't know, I think most people probably know what gaiters are, but there's a bottom lit thing here. So this thing goes and it keeps the gaiters down. Then there'll usually be a little lace hook. Not sure if we're having proper focus. Lighting over here is a little better. So then you have a lace hook in most gaiters. So you'll hook that onto your lace, and the system that gaiters use are gonna be different. Sometimes they're zip, sometimes they're Velcro, sometimes they're snap and Velcro. I'm not really fully putting these on. But then you'll have usually a cinch. So you'll cinch this down, and what this does is now snow can't get into your boots anymore. Snow would have to come up and get in from here, and the cinch will keep most of the snow out. There are snow pants and snowboard pants and stuff that have gaiters basically built into them. So if you have those kinds of pants, you don't necessarily need gaiters. Now there are boots, these are new. I have only worn them one time actually, Baffins. These are like serious winter boots. So some boots even have the cinch down gaiter type dealios built into them. But you can see these boots even have a dedicated thing to hook that gaiter portion into, and they're fully waterproof, removable insulated liner as well. So if you're just out car camping or whatever, you don't need something like this, but if you're out in the backcountry more, then something like that might be a good idea. And then, you know, snowshoes and whatnot. On top of that, you want to keep your head warm, so hoods are great. Beanies are great. You lose a lot of heat out the top of your head, especially if you're bald. I have a ton of built-in hair insulation. Balaclavas are also great. Obviously, they're like a beanie, but add more neck protection, keep all the heat in, and then keep your face warm as well. Make sure it has some way to ventilate because you don't want to trap all of that humidity down in your body. If it's very cold, a lot of times I will sleep with a balaclava so I can keep my face warm and I'm not having to put my head inside of my sleeping bag, breathing humidity into your sleeping bag. Again, moisture is your enemy in the cold. So that's basically some general clothing considerations. Then you have to eat. So you can do whatever you want. This is a controversial subject, eating. I'm pretty lazy, but it makes even more sense in the winter bagged meals. I absolutely love Peak Refuel. Full disclosure, they are a channel sponsor, but also anybody that's tried them knows that they're just the best. So bagged meals are twofold. One, they're really easy to make. You don't have to do ingredients and chop this up and do prep and freeze your hands off for anything. Jet boil plus Peak, the absolute best way to make food in the winter. Delicious, nutritious, filling. And when you put the hot water in there, that turns into a big hand warmer. Sorry, I'll try to keep my hands out of here because it jacks up the focus. That turns into a big hand warmer. So put your hands on it, put it in your jacket, whatever you want to do. That'll warm your body when the food is essentially cooking. And then afterwards, it's a very hearty meal, lots of protein. A lot of these have more calories. And when your body is digesting food, it is actually also running pretty hot. So you eat food, you might even want to eat a couple meals, or you want to spread it out depending on how long you're out, or eat sooner to when you go to bed, because as your body is digesting the food through the night, it'll actually help keep you warm as well. So a nice big hearty meal also helps. Now you need water to make these, and water will freeze if it's cold, so you do want to insulate your water. If you're not in a heated environment, you want to put water in an insulated jug, or actually you could just bring a full-on cooler and that'll insulate everything. This will slow down the rate at which water will freeze. If you just take water out in an Nalgene, for instance, and it's not in a heated place, this bottle will freeze pretty quick, even if it's just a little bit below freezing. So insulated bottle for your water. And then a jet boil is just the easiest thing to boil water in. So boiled water plus food is always my recommendation for cold weather camping. Now sleep systems, this is just the unpacked bed of my truck from last time I was out actually camping. Last time I camped in this uninsulated shell, I used a diesel heater, and it did get down to -2, but it stayed, in the 40s inside of the camper shell when I was running the diesel heat just kind of a little bit through the night. So sleep systems, the warmest way to sleep, if you really just care about warmth, is get a high R value pad. So if you're sleeping directly on the ground will want to suck the heat out of you because you're in contact with it. If you're in a hammock, you will get cold also because the air will be cold, but there's something about sleeping on the ground that really freezes you. So you want to have an insulation barrier underneath you. So most good camping pads will come with an R value. This is a Born Outdoor bedroll, Badger roll it's called. And in it, there's a Thermarest something rather. I think it's an R6 or an R7 sleeping pad. And that is a lot of R value to keep the underside of you warm. Now this system has the bed, that's the under of you, and then it has a sheet and then a down blanket and then actually a wool blanket on top. So it has R7 below you and then R whatever it is above you. That is the best way to do it, because when you're in a normal sleeping bag that wraps fully around you, all of the insulation under you is getting compressed. So the R value is essentially going to nothing. Sleeping bags are still good because they do hold in a lot of your heat. So like a really cold rated mummy sleeping bag is still going to be your best bet because you're not having to heat the rest of this. This will be more comfortable. You can move around a little bit. So this will always be my preferred method. But in absolute extreme cold, you will want a mummy bag. So that way your feet are basically fully encapsulated, nice and snug, and you're not needing to heat a big area. But if you are car camping, you have the luxuries of bringing a heated blanket with you. Now, most of these heated blankets suck. This is like a heated mattress topper, a specific one that's really designed for truckers. I will link it down below. I forget what it's called, but this is by far the best one. It costs a little more, but I think it's only around $100. If you have the room for it, you're not sleeping in a mummy bag, this is heavenly. A heated blanket inside of like a mattress with blankets, while not the absolute best for cold weather. If you didn't have the heated blanket, if you have the heated blanket, now turns it into basically a luxury sleeping experience. So the luxury sleeping experience is this is going to be able to generate heat before you get into bed. That's the key here. So you're hanging out at the campfire, doing whatever you want, having a good time, and things are kind of winding down and people are saying, hey, I'm gonna go brush my teeth and get ready for bed or whatever. So about 5-10 minutes before bed, you come on and you click this baby on and it preheats the system. So then by the time you're ready, you're undressed and you actually get in under the covers, it's warm. There's nothing better, like even a diesel heater, there is nothing better than having your mattress and your blankets and everything warm for you. So this, if you have the luxury of power, because you need a power source for it, is an absolute game changer for winter camping. I love it, no shame in my heated blanket game. Now you will need power, something like this. It doesn't have to be a Jackery. This is a Jackery Explorer 1000. I like Jackeries. I didn't like when the handle was fixed, the previous generation fixed handle, but this one now folds flat. It's nice and compact. You can store it, you can put it in the car and stack stuff on top of it. It's great. So this has AC and DC. You can charge your cell phones or your drones or your cameras or whatever there. You can run your heated blanket or whatever. Even has a light on it. I actually use this light in here. In the back, I used it as just like a light to illuminate things, kind of like a lantern. That was the only time I've ever used the light on one of these things, because I've always thought, well, that's stupid, I would never use it. And then here I am, I actually used it. So this is a 1000. So a lot of times these batteries will have a number, 1000, 2000, 300, 500, and that is going to be the watt hours typically. So watt hours, if you're using 100 watts, that'll last 10 hours roughly. That's the rough estimate. If you're using 10 watts, it'll last 100 hours. If you're using 1000 watts, it'll last an hour. This uses at max, I believe, 100 watts. This will use anywhere from 20 to 40 watts when it's kind of running. It's a little more when it's started for diesel heater. But anyway, diesel heater or heated blanket will rely on power, whether you have a generator or a dual battery system in your rig or a battery. You will need power, but that is the ultimate game changer for comfortably sleeping in the winter. Everything else I talked about with clothes and everything apply, but then you have a little more flexibility with your sleep systems. Rather than a negative 20-degree mummy bag, you can now run a heated blanket and be a little more comfortable. You can also use, I talked about it earlier, hand warmers. Sometimes I'll put hand warmers in my socks. They sell special toe ones that you put on the outside of your socks. Hand warmers down at the foot of your mummy bag also work well, or in your sock. Just be careful because some of these aren't supposed to go like directly on your skin. But hand warmers, if you don't have the luxury of power, does a similar thing to a heated blanket. So that is, you'll need power for that. And then the other game changer, there are a multitude of ways to heat. Whether you have a hot tent and you're actually burning wood, that's cool. I kind of want to get into that, honestly. Maybe I'll do a little bit of that this winter if I have some time. Or there are the Mr. Buddy heaters, which just run off of the little 1-gallon propane tanks, but you're not technically supposed to really use those inside because they produce a bunch of condensation. Again, wetness, condensation, bad. Also some more fumes. These actually have a separate exhaust, so they exhaust all of the bad heat. You could put this inside and exhaust it out, or most people put this outside and exhaust the heat. Well, this is just heat. They put the heat, they run this outside and then run a heat tube into the cab. If you watched my latest camping video, that's what I did. I set this on a little table. So then the exhaust portion has its own intake. You can think of it as an engine, an intake, and an exhaust for the engine. And then that is actually just heating regular air, and that regular air that has no humidity, there's no condensation, there's no noxious gases or anything like that, is blowing just heated, pure air into your cabin. So that's a nice, dry, clean way to add heat. These have taken storm, so to speak, in the last couple of years for car camping for a very good reason. This one is from, what is it again? H-Calorie or H-Calorie, I don't know how it's pronounced. All in one unit, has a diesel tank in here, has the heating unit, has all of the electronics. These can even be controlled with an app on your phone. So it can be outside and you can turn the heat up and down Bluetooth from your phone inside. These are probably the biggest game changer when it comes to comfortable winter camping. Now, people use these to heat caps, they use them to heat vans, they use them to heat rooftop tents, and they use them to heat ground tents. So it's actually a very versatile thing and can heat for multiple people, whereas your heated blanket is really heating for you, or maybe you have 2 people under your blankets, but that's a little more limited. This will heat the whole area. When you're just using a heated blanket, you still, when you get up in the morning, you still have the shock of having to get out of here and it's very cold. Whereas the diesel heater, if you have an enclosed space, it's still heated up. So you can kind of get out of bed, and that's a nice transition. I didn't mention it with clothes though. When you do take off your clothes and you get down to your base layer, or maybe just right down to your boxers, or maybe you sleep naked, I don't know, you are gonna have to think about putting clothes back on in the morning. Now again, depending on if you're heating the space or if you have a heated blanket or you're just using your body heat, there are some different methods to keep your clothes. You can even dry them out if you have a diesel heater. The clothes that you're gonna wear the next morning, it's much nicer when you can put on warm clothes. Now, one of the things is when you're wearing a base layer, again, one of the main reasons I wear this is if I have that on as a base layer and I need to put on cold pants or a cold shirt or a cold jacket in the morning, it's not cold directly on my skin. So it's not like sucking that heat off of me instantly, but there are ways around it. Again, diesel heater, heated blanket. You can put your clothes that you're gonna wear the next morning inside if your sleeping bag or your blankets have room, inside, underneath, so your body's kind of keeping them warm till the next day. You can also do that with cell phones. Some batteries don't like to be super cold, so if you're running one of these, they won't work in extreme cold. So if you're running it with a diesel heater and you're heating the space, keep the battery in the space that is being heated. Don't keep the battery outside because it will quit working on you if it gets too cold. Or you can put a jacket over if it's real cold. Normally these things need to vent. Normally these things, if you're running the inverter, especially on a decent load, fans will be running in here and it'll need to cool it off. But if it's extremely cold, you could almost, and I do it sometimes, I'm not telling you to, maybe avoid your warranty, don't listen to me on this part, but I'll oftentimes put a jacket or something over it to keep the heat that this thing is making inside of it, so it keeps the cells a little bit warmer and it'll continue to operate. So these things will typically be able to deplete the batteries in a colder temperature than they're able to be charged, so they'll need to be a little warmer to take a charge, but they'll be able to give you power down to typically a colder temperature than giving them a charge. But anyway, if you're running a diesel heater, put this in the heated space. That would be the best bet, rather than outside or like in the cab of your vehicle that is unheated. So that is that tip. And then beyond that, one thing that you may do, you can, run your car for heat. If you're car camping and you're really cold, you can start that, but typically vehicles don't like to idle for a long time. Sometimes you're running lights or charging phones or whatever, and in the cold, batteries have a hard time, and actually turning over the engine has a hard time. So in extreme cold, especially if you have an older diesel or something, you might even want to plug in an engine block heater. I've never done any of that for a gas engine. It's been fine, but there have definitely been times when I've been out camping and people's batteries have been dead in the morning. So another thing that you definitely want to bring out with you is a battery jump starter. All right, I didn't really know what that video was going to look like, basically just rambling tips for winter camping. And that's what it was. I think it was basically what I wanted to do. So hopefully it was helpful for you, especially if you're new to it, because it's a little intimidating. But if you follow a lot of that advice, you can have yourself a very survivable and a very comfortable winter camping experience. And those are most of the tips that I've picked up along the way. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any more tips or anything to correct me on, feel free to do it down below in the comments. I always like hearing new tips, especially for winter camping. Also, for me, for myself, I don't know if I've talked about it on the channel. I've talked about it with some friends. I kind of want to do some more roughing it winter camping. I don't know why. There's something in the man in me that doesn't want to get too soft or something. Like, I love being comfortable. Don't get me wrong, a nice 6-inch memory foam self-inflating mattress with a heated blanket and a diesel heater when it's 0 degrees outside, that's great. I love that. No poo-poo in that. I love it. I would do it. I do it. I do it. But there's also something about roughing it. So I kind of want to do some more extreme winter camping, whether that's just in extreme cold where I'm surviving with a diesel heater and stuff, or if it's just kind of unsupported, I walk out into the woods and survive with a minimal kit. I don't know. Would you guys like to watch that? Maybe. Making a video of that's much more painful than just doing it. And I just kind of want to do it. But maybe I'll make a video of it. Let me know down below what you'd like to see, and let me know any tips you have. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Get subscribed to the channel if you're not, and leave a thumbs up. And until next time, take care.